Hello, everybody. Welcome to How's It Going? Thanks for tuning in. My name is Leo Young, and in today's How's It Going, uh, I'd like to share with you one person's journey into real estate. Now, before we dive in, just a disclaimer again, any information that we cover is for entertainment purposes. So before doing anything material with it, consult a professional. With that being said, I'd like to introduce the guest of today's show. So he is a close friend and past client of mine, and he is a creative professional and a pilot in training. So please, everybody, welcome Prasant and Pallikandi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello. How are you,
Hi.
Josh?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Definitely. Thank you for coming on. I love the backdrop and everything. You got the perfect setup going for you.
I don't know if you remember this place. You had a hand in me
Yeah.
acquiring
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I did. Definitely. So let's start with that. So Prash, can you just sort of share with the audience here what your experience is going into real estate and your first foray into being a landlord?
Absolutely. So when I first heard about buying my own house, I was maybe like 22, 23.
Mhm.
And at that age, I don't think I realized how important it was to be building equity in your own property. So I kind of bought into the idea of like renting and renting these really nice high rises and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we did for about what 8 9 years of our marriage.
Sure.
At some point, we're like, hey, like what are we doing here? We're helping somebody else kind of pay their mortgage. So we're like, why don't we use the same money to kind of put that money back into our pockets and build equity in a piece of property? And that's kind of when we reached out to you, or rather, you reached out to me. You kind of planted the idea in my head
Yeah,
to
definitely.
like go forward and seek it. So I got that call from you, and you're like, "Hey, are you guys looking to buy a home?" And I was like, "I wasn't looking, but I'm thinking about it now."
Mhm. Right.
uh, and that's where the journey started. We kind of gave you the parameters of the kind of house that we wanted,
Mhm.
and like you wasted no time in putting up the our profile on MLS and getting us all kinds of links within like 2 or 3 days. And I
Mhm.
think a week later, you had this lined up.
Right.
I remember driving down to New Bedford and like meeting you outside somewhere here, and
Mhm.
we saw house after house after house, and we saw this one, and we ran the numbers, and it made really good financial sense. I guess our process buying this house was a little bit different from what most people's process would have been. I think it was less emotional, and it
Mhm.
had to do the numbers work. Like, does the rental income, mortgage, everything kind of balance itself out? Are we actually saving money living here? Are we building equity faster? All that kind of stuff had to factor in versus it being, do I like how it looks and do I like how the kitchen looks and all that kind of stuff. Needless to say, it came pretty kitted out. So
Right.
we didn't do much to it. It was pretty
Mhm.
much moving ready. It
Right.
had tenants as well. So we literally just kind of took over and it's been
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you said, the whole idea of building equity is so important
Right.
because instead of just paying rent to somebody to pay their mortgage, you sort of pay into something that you own yourself one day. And especially for people in America, and that's what makes it so powerful because there's a lot of government programs that sort of make it easier for first-time home buyers to get into their homes instead of paying like a big hefty like 20% down payment.
Mhm.
You paid closer to what, like 3.5%, right?
Yeah, it was for this one. It was 3.5%,
Hmm. Yeah.
and uh, like it was 3.5% down. Yeah, there were you do have to build a little bit of buffer to factor in closing costs and stuff,
Yeah.
but it was really affordable. Like we went from renting to owning in less than a month and a half, 2 months.
It's pretty crazy. Hey,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And so for those of you that don't know, Prash, they bought an investment property. So this is a three family. It's not a conventional single family home. And what that is just instead of just one family in one building, you have many families in one building. And having being in one unit yourself and renting out the other two, that definitely helps a lot in paying your mortgage in that regards.
Yeah, absolutely. It gave us kind of the freedom to kind of restructure our lives a little bit and work towards paying off like consumer debt and student loan debt and all that kind of stuff. So it gave us a little more breathing room, and at the same time, like we're building equity in this piece of land and this property.
Mhm.
Um, it I was apprehensive at first because I was like, is this the right time to buy a house? Mortgage rates are kind of high. Property values were kind of high at the time.
Right.
Didn't make sense. But then you run the numbers and you're like, what even if it is so high, you're still coming out on top. So what are you waiting for?
Exactly. And it just it takes some planning. Definitely it's not just a matter of rushing into the first house that you like.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
I mean, we walked around,
yeah.
made that wonderful, pros and cons list. You kind of helped us
Yep.
narrow down because I was like all over the place. I was like, I like the water, but I also like streets, and I like trees, and I like this, and I like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but you kind of narrowed things down. And Bariana is also very like numbers driven. So she's
Mhm.
like, this one has solar on it. This one has tenants in it. It has
Right.
it's on a easily to maintain plot of land. It's by the ocean. Just take it.
Yeah, definitely. And solar is a great thing to have on your house too. And we'll talk about that in like a later point. But
Yeah.
just in terms of your experience so far, like and what you've learned. So it's
Mhm.
been almost like a year, right, since you guys have gotten this place.
Yeah, we closed on it in August, and we're coming up to a year now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And so, what have you, what like key takeaways have you learned that you'd like to share with our viewers today?
Educate yourself before getting into it,
Yeah,
right? Because it's very easy to become the douchebag landlord.
yeah. Continue.
Understand what you can and can't do,
Hmm.
and understand that the people who are also living in this building are helping pay your mortgage.
Hmm.
So it's a business. It's a business transaction. It's your business. Treat them like how you treat your customers, and it all starts with there. I think there was a little booklet you gave me called "How to Be a Good Landlord and Not Get into Legal Trouble," and I think that
Yeah,
booklet really helped.
yeah,
So I would say like understand what you're getting into. There's a lot of people out there. Like when we were going through this process of buying this house,
hmm,
there were just so many naysayers. I think, oh my God, being a landlord is hard. It's I've heard so many horror stories, and
right,
then you really come down to it, and you're like, well, are you a landlord? They're like, no. I'm like, so where'd you hear the stories? Where are these stories coming from?
right.
So like just kind of educate yourself on what you're about to get into and play by the rules and just be a decent landlord. Be a good human being.
Definitely. And you said it well too. So one of the things that I keep in mind when I hear just general advice from people, I try to separate the advice from the person because
Hmm.
sometimes the person giving the advice may not A, may not be qualified to give the advice, or B,
Right.
may not be relevant.
Right.
Like if there's like people out there saying, hey, being a landlord is a nightmare, blah, 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 like what's their experience and where are they getting that information wrong?
Right. So get the information from a qualified source. Either speak
Yeah.
to someone who is a landlord, who's been doing this a while, and figure out what they do right, what they've learned from the process. And I think forums like this kind of help that education get around, and just read up on it.
Right.
I'm perfect or I'm a fantastic landlord,
Mhm.
but I mean, we managed to keep our tenants since we bought the property. So
There you go.
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, like aside from the common sense things, aside from knowing who you're renting to, it's very important that you act from a place of empathy, right? As you said, I mean, they're people too, and if you sort of understand their situation and sort of create a win-win scenario, like it should be pretty smooth, right?
Absolutely. And I understand, like, you as a landlord, you've got your taxes to pay, you got your mortgage to pay. Like, those things don't change. We're going through a pretty difficult crises right now where people are losing their jobs and they're not able to find other jobs.
Mhm.
So, like, you as a landlord, you could either try to make it harder for them, which makes it in turn harder for you,
Right.
make it easier for them, kind of be a little more lenient about stuff,
Mhm.
and things just kind of work themselves out.
Right. Definitely. And I would say, especially in a time like this, there is no uh, hard rule book. It's not like, oh, if this, then that, you know, if you're late paying, then this happens. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
complex.
So the leniency kind of goes a long way. Like, hey, it's okay if you don't pay all of it by the 5th. Take till the 10th. Take till the 15th if you need to. Like,
Yeah.
I'm still here. You're still here. I know where you live.
Exactly. Exactly. Uh, and just in your particular case, I think it's more beneficial for you guys because you're living in the same place.
Right.
Then it is. It's not like, oh, hey, I'm going to buy a condo and rent that one out, and the condo is
Yeah.
like 30 minutes away from where I live, because then there's a bit more of a disconnect there.
I agree, but I think nothing can't be surmounted by setting the right processes.
Definitely.
Um, I used to run a business before that I sold, and what really got it to run how long it did, and what got us to where we were was the processes.
Hmm.
If you make the processes to manageable enough where it can be managed remotely, whether you're there, you're not there, you have good communication with your tenants, you build rapport with them, like, each other,
Hmm.
whether it's one property or 10 properties. I think it and even if they're not geographically located in the same area as you are,
Yeah.
it's so much easier. Processes, processes, processes. That's all I have to say there.
Definitely. Like having good systems is just very important. Um,
Yeah.
in everything, in communication, in success, in life in general.
Yeah. I use so in order to help that whole system out,
Mhm.
because human contact is great, but sometimes you just need a tech system that's impartial, that just collects the data and shows things as they are.
For sure.
Right. Well, I've signed up for this platform called Cozy.
Hmm.
It's basically a rental management platform.
Okay.
Uh, they help with finding tenants and they do background checks and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
But I use it for like everyday bookkeeping and
Yeah.
maintenance requests and all that kind of stuff. So it's like it keeps those things transactional as they should be,
Right.
taking the emotion out of like everyday transactions.
Right. So yeah, it just highlights the importance. Like, although it's important to empathize with people, but you also need systems to keep everything organized.
Absolutely. so that there's never a discrepancy of, hey, I gave you this last week, or I didn't know how much I owed. And there's none of that. Like a tenant can just log into the platform, they see how much they owe, they see what bills are coming up, they see everything's there. Like there's no questions about it. And if they ever need to go back in history and find something, they don't have to ask me for it. They just log in and it's there.
Right. That's good. So
Yeah.
it's basically a portal where you and the tenants could all get on and see.
Yeah. So each tenant gets an ID. If it's a new tenant and they do their background check through Cozy, it kind of just draws them into that whole process and starts my rent collection through them as well.
Sure.
So it's very easy. I mean, you don't have to use Cozy like I do. I just use it because I did my research and it best suited my needs.
Hmm.
But you could use Trello, you could use it, anything.
Brilliant. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I realized that at the start of the show I forgot to introduce the charity of the week. So I
Oh,
mean, as all you viewers know, every week we have a charity for y'all to donate to. So if you learn something new, if you get some value out of this, I definitely recommend donating to the charity of the week. Prash, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
absolutely. Given our current situation, I think the one that comes most to mind is feedingamerica.org. They themselves could use your help because they do a lot of great work in indexing your local food banks. Food banks really get down to grassroots and help the local communities that they serve in bridge the gap, right, between getting back on their feet and where they were before. With layoffs and all that kind of stuff, some families fall into kind of a tough situation, and these local food banks are there to help. So I'd say go to feedingamerica.org. If you want to donate to them directly, or find your local food bank, enter your zip code, find your local food bank, and donate to your local food bank. It goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. So we'll include a link for that in the video that we post, and yeah, feel free, people. Just throw them a few dollars. Every bit counts. And anyway, so speaking of the introduction, did
Mhm.
you want to tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, about your background, aside from real estate?
Yeah, so I have a background in marketing and communications design. So that means everything that you feel, see, hear, and touch about a company is usually crafted by someone like me.
Mhm.
It involves advertising, television production, PR outreach, whatever that is.
Nice.
Uh, that's my background.
Okay.
Um, I do have a passion in aviation. I think if I hadn't found marketing,
Mhm.
and if I carried on my original course, which is to become an airline pilot,
Mhm.
I would have been a pilot by now. But life takes you where it does, and eventually you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I want to reconnect with my original passion and joy. So I've started to learn to fly again, and
Okay.
yeah,
Awesome. Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun.
definitely. And I think just in life in general, there's a lot of um, well, I just suggestions, hard suggestions from society saying like, hey,
Mhm.
you need to start early, you need to find your passion like from day one and then just
Yeah,
build your whole career on it. But that's
yeah.
not necessarily true. I mean,
That
our
is a lot of pressure if you can think about that, right? Like you're coming out of college and you're like, the world is my oyster, and the world's telling you find that one thing now because you
yeah,
got to stay good for the rest of your life. That's like a lot of pressure on you.
for
So
sure.
do what makes you happy, do what you enjoy doing. And if you find something else that also makes you happy, there's nothing wrong in doing both.
Hmm.
I've met doctors who also work as airline pilots.
Yeah.
I've
Wow.
like it's if you really want to do it, you can, and you can do both. You can have both.
Yeah,
It doesn't
definitely.
have.
Right, right. I mean, there's no age requirement in anything.
No. Yeah, the retirement age for pilots, I think, is 63. Um,
Right.
but as long as you're under 63, I think you
Right.
have fair.
Yeah. Yeah. And from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have like that retirement age because their eyesight sort of fades away around that age.
It's just risk factors increase with age, so
Gotcha.
uh, like it's better to get you retired before you have some serious problems that could impede the safety of your flight.
Okay, I gotcha. So since we're talking about aviation now,
Yeah.
I know that like for sure pilot training it's super rigorous and tough. So like
Mhm.
what inspired you to do this like undertaking?
So when I was a teenager, uh, right after high school and before I joined college,
Sure.
I joined the Indian Air Force's National Cadet Corps
Hmm.
with the hopes of becoming an airline pilot.
Okay.
But things didn't work out the way I intended, and I ended up, getting my bachelor's in visual communication. Ended up going to Australia, getting my master's, meeting my wife, getting married. Uh, and then recently I was like, okay, I've kind of got this figured out a little bit. So let me
Mhm.
go back to the things that I really, really, really enjoy doing and see if I can have both.
Right. Okay.
And how I did that is, so that's kind of what catalyzed this whole buying the property thing,
Right.
because buying this property gave me a little bit more wiggle room financially to go do those other things.
Hmm.
And that's what I've done.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, thankfully, my wife has a great job and
Yeah.
a great career at what she does, and like things are working out.
Yeah, definitely. That's so great to hear. I mean, just you being able to afford a level of financial freedom so then you can pursue your passion as well at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't call it complete freedom. It's more of flexibility.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Makes sense.
giving you the wiggle room that you didn't have before.
Definitely. Definitely. And just let's say from your pilot training, I
Mhm.
never done anything like this before. Like what are some of the biggest takeaways that you've gotten from this? In I mean, aside from learning how to fly, like maybe life lessons or anything like that.
Right. Plan,
Hmm.
because proper planning prevents poor performance. Right.
A lot of people.
Like if you plan and you know what your risks are, when you get to the point when you do eventually face those risks, you're not a surprise or you're not scrambling.
Hmm.
And train, because planning plus training keeps you completely level-headed when those situations arise.
Hmm.
uh, Imagine taking off in your airplane, not planning for the weather, and all of a sudden you're in a storm, in a thunderstorm. That's
Right.
a pretty dangerous situation that you would have completely avoided if you just
Yeah.
looked at a weather radar.
Right.
So it's not going to be a bad situation
Hmm.
if you plan for it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I mean I haven't flown yet, but I definitely agree on the planning aspect. Uh,
Hmm.
Me personally, I plan out so many aspects of my life. I plan out my year, I plan out my month, my week, and even my days.
Hmm.
So I sort of know what to expect and which sort of general trajectory I want to be going in and
Yeah.
how to get there.
So when you get to a challenge in your day, it's not a surprise to you. It's not an emergency to you.
Right.
You face it head on and you figure out how you resolve that challenge because you've kind of planned for it.
Hmm. Definitely. Okay. So just moving on to the marketing aspect. So you
Mhm.
mentioned that you do a lot of all things company related. Can you tell us
Something brand image related.
brand
Yeah.
image related? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like your what you do and what you enjoy about it?
Yeah, so I specialize in early stage startups,
Nice.
uh, in helping develop their brand identity and brand equity,
Mm.
to a point that it even ends up helping their funding rounds, because they've now built sufficient brand recognition, that investors recognize the brands. They automatically associate value to something that is easily recognized. People tend to perceive stuff that they recognize and see more as more valuable.
Yeah.
Uh, if you saw more, let's say, a certain brand of car in a certain neighborhood a lot more, you start to associate that car with the status of that neighborhood.
Right.
And that's exactly how that's branding or brand equity in practice right there.
Mm.
So that's what I help do.
Mhm.
Um, I help them, everything from designing their logo, their color palette, to the science behind why certain colors are used, or certain things are written a certain way, or certain things look certain way,
Right.
uh, to the actual material that the organization sales force would need to go out and communicate their message effectively.
Mhm.
Pitch decks, websites, you name it, we got it.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And just in terms of your process, like what is your process like when you're thinking, okay, how do I make the marketing collateral for this company?
Yeah. So the first thing we do is we spend a lot of time getting into the mind of the CEO of the company.
Hmm.
Um, because once you know where they're coming from and where they want to go,
Hmm.
it's then easy to put all the pieces that kind of fit in together, right?
Right.
So once we know where they came from, where they want to go, we try to figure out who they need to talk to get there.
Hmm.
And that's the second part, where we actually spend time getting into the minds of the people that will be helping this brand get to where they want to
Right.
go. So there's a lot of like soul searching that happens first with the CEO,
Hmm.
and then there's a lot of talking to everybody around that's going to help us make it happen, to really understand who they are, where they come from, and what kind of speaks to them.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember this. I think there was someone at Tesla that used to say this a lot, like figure out what melts their butter.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I do. Figure out what melts
Yeah.
people's
Okay.
and then churn that butter for them.
There you go. Okay. And that sort of plays into what you mentioned earlier about flying as well, right? So you need to plan the path and
Right.
know where to go, essentially.
Right. Yeah. You know where you're starting from, and you know where you're going to end up. And
Hmm.
then you got to just put all those pieces that kind of go in between. But if you start out without planning anything, you don't know where you're going to end up. And if you don't have a destination, like you're just flying around aimlessly, wasting gas,
Right? That's very true.
or using up all your gas and
Yeah,
probably in the ocean somewhere.
definitely. And that even ties into real estate as well. I mean, this
Absolutely.
is a really it's a really broad process, and you can really be thinking in six different directions at one time. But
Yeah,
with a plan and the proper discipline, you can get to where you want to get to.
absolutely. One thing I really believe in is setting smart goals, right?
There
Like,
you go.
so you set your smart goals.
Yeah.
It gives it a time frame. It gives it something that's attainable. It gives it um, uh, a result that you would expect from achieving that goal. Like,
Right.
it defines everything for you very clearly, so that you know what your destination is. You know what your destination looks like. Let me put this in like a flight analogy, right?
Yeah.
If you're a pilot, you want to know where your airport is, how high above the ground it is, how long the runway is, what the winds are going to be like when you get there, what
Yeah.
the weather is going to be like when you get there.
Hmm.
And if they have flight services for you, because once you get there, you might need to fill up gas, you might need to get back.
True.
You want to know all those things before you get there.
Definitely.
So planning and figuring out all those things will definitely get you to where you want to be, as long as you practice those right habits that make you want to get there.
Definitely. Yeah, and just going back to real estate real quick. So, you've helped me on a couple projects,
Yeah,
including photography and videography. And
yeah,
something that stood out to me when working with you was the way that you think. You know, I think that I love the way that you sort of have everything planned out. And would you mind just sharing like what your thought process is just when you're
yeah.
working through a house?
Absolutely. So when working on houses, one thing I'd like to do is spend time with a realtor, because as much as I'd like to spend time with the actual seller and the buyer, like that's not possible. So the realtor is the person that really knows who the sellers are and who the potential buyers are. So to figure out like what matters to those people, and then planning to capture during that photo shoot what is going to matter to those people.
Definitely.
Right. So if we're selling to I'll get, like for example, if we're selling to families, we're going to want to capture yard space and living room spaces, the bedrooms, maybe the kitchen, right? And or if we're selling to some, people who are slightly older, or people who are retired, you want to talk about accessibility facilities and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I kind of start with the realtor,
Hmm.
plan out my photo shoot, and then go execute it.
Right. Exactly.
And there's always going to be like curveballs that'll happen while you're there, and things get added on. But as long as you got like 80% the base of it figured out, like once you're at location, it's just execution of your plan.
Right. Right. So to bring it to bring in some aviation terms,
Yeah.
if you know where to fly to and the general direction, it's easy to make these minor corrections here and there, right?
Yeah, so it's like a flight plan, right? So
Yeah.
you file a flight plan saying, I want to go from here to here. This is how I'm going to get there. And then on the way, things might change, weather might change, traffic might change, there might be flight restrictions. So air traffic controller or the air traffic control would move you around
Hmm.
based on current situations, but more or less you're following that flight plan.
Yeah.
And it's already defined and planned out before you even started.
Right. That's great. And just for everybody watching, um, so Prash, you're able to help people, to help companies with their brand image and real estate photography in general. Is there like a website that people can find you at and connect with you on that regards?
Absolutely. So people can find me on my portfolio. It's www.prasantpallikandi.com. I'm sure Leo's going to put the link in the description because
Definitely.
that was long. So it's prasantpallikandi.com. It's my name.
Yep,
Love to hear more about your brand and whatever your projects are, and see how we can make it happen.
definitely. Well, I think we're just about running out of time right here. Let's do like one like question. So
Okay.
just to wrap it up, what is your favorite book to read,
Ooh.
or just a book that you like a lot recently?
Okay. Um, so, because so many books come to mind, I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
James Altucher's book, but at the
yeah.
same time, like, this is gonna sound super frou-frou,
Hmm.
but it has to be um, was it the magic?
The
The
Magic.
Secret. No, it's called The Secret.
Oh, The Secret. The Secret.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love science and I'm all for it,
Hmm.
but there's some kind of truth in the book The Secret.
Definitely.
Um, like if you're a super logical person and you read that book, it all just kind of seems like fluff.
Hmm.
But then you kind of, after you read that book, you tend to take a moment and step back and kind of pay attention to things around you, and then you realize like what you put out into the world is what you get back,
Right. It's true.
and you kind of manifest your reality in a way to speak.
Right. You sort of create your world based on your.
Yeah, you create your world, you manifest the things in your life.
Hmm.
My wife is like an ace at doing this. Like
Yeah.
I can give her the most random thing to manifest. Like I'll be like, manifest a red spade, and like I don't know, some 4 days
Yeah.
later, somehow
Right.
someone brings us a red spade.
Right.
And to me at first, like listening to her talk about stuff like that, I was like, this is BS.
Yeah.
But the more I've lived it, the more I see it every day, the more I believe it.
Hmm. That's.
And I think that's a very if not for understanding that book word for word or taking it like a Bible, like
Mhm.
just kind of understand the essence of where that book is coming from.
Yeah.
And then Astrophysics for People in a Hurry,
Yeah.
which uh, by Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Hmm.
He kind of gets, so he brings up a very important hypothesis, right? If we're made up of atoms,
Yeah.
and atoms affect other atoms around it,
Hmm.
why can't the energy you put out be affecting your surroundings,
Right.
right? Like that's not a big jump to think that that can be true.
Right.
So I do understand that there's some fluff in the way the secret's written, but there's also a bit of truth in there.
Definitely. And the mind is one of those things that it's just so complex and so powerful. I mean, we as humans, it's the mind studying the mind. So
Yeah,
you're going to know 100% of it, and there's always going to be some things that can't be explained by science.
right.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that.
Yeah. And
It's
it
also a belief of charismatic people. Like they
yeah.
kind of so there's this book called The Charisma Myth.
Hmm.
Who wrote it? And it basically talks about how charismatic people basically make up their own reality.
Mm.
They say things and do things
Yeah.
that turn out to be self-fulfilling prophecies around them.
Definitely.
And that's kind of part of their charisma.
Hmm.
So there is definitely some science to it. There's some understanding to it, or there's some truth to it that we haven't understood yet. And
Hmm.
I definitely give all those three books a recommendation and read.
Yeah. Okay. And you would say that these books definitely helped you in life too, right?
They
Visualize,
did.
believe
They did. So I'm a reader who doesn't store everything he reads. Like
in.
I get the gist of what the book is, and I tend to internalize it and apply it in my everyday life. But if you were to ask me, hey, can you quote me on this item in the book? I'm like, I don't know where I read that, or,
Right.
or I don't remember what it exactly said. But I
Right.
tend to internalize stuff and practice it in real life, and I think that's important. Like just reading stuff but not internalizing or practicing it
Yeah.
is no good.
Right. Right. Knowledge without execution is just,
Yeah, absolutely.
well, that's great, man.
Those are my takeaways, right? Like knowledge, execution, planning. Knowledge, planning, execution.
Okay.
So you
Love it.
nailed those
Now,
three, and I think you're all set for
yeah. That's
it.
well. Thank you for sharing that, Prash. And with that being said, we've run out of time.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you
so
for
much
having
for coming on and sharing all your experiences and everything. Do you have anything last minute to add?
me. I just want to thank everybody for making my life the way it is. Like,
Well
thank you.
said. Definitely. Well, thank you for making my life the way it is.
Of course.
um, And yeah, just to remind everybody, if you've gotten something, if you learned something from today's show, please consider to donate to your local food bank or foodbank.org. And for all things creative,
And Feeding America.
yep, PRASANT PALLIKANDI.com.
Yeah.
The links will be below. It's a mouthful. It's all good. And I will see you all next time. All right. Thanks, Prash. See you.
Yeah. Bye.